This is the ZMAR Podcast. Elite Benefits of America helps small and mid-sized companies with their health insurance programs. And now, your host, Butch ZMAR.
Everyone looks for cutting corners, and so there's this story, and it's actually a book called The Last Dive, and I'm just going to summarize some of it, and it's going to transfer over to business decisions, but there was a father and son scuba diver. They're well-trained. I do believe they were cave certified. They were technical divers. They knew better in a lot of ways. Well-trained to a certain degree. They did a lot of East Coast diving, all these shipwrecks, but there was this new shipwreck that nobody knew what the name of the shipwreck was, and they wanted to be the first ones to figure out who discovered the shipwreck, right? And so there's no name yet. They don't know what it is, and they wanted to be the first one. So they try to organize, put together logistics, the dive boat, how many dives it was going to take, maybe some, I think they took sonar and figured out like where possible points of entry are and where they might have needed to go, and they're trying to figure all this out, right? And so in that planning process, right, they had come up with a money issue. And again, I'm summarizing, there's so many more details in there, and it's not directly related to money, but I'm just summarizing it to money because we're going to transfer it to business, because that's ultimately what ended up happening, because if it was cheaper, they would have done something different. So they were well experienced. They've done mixed gas diving. They've done a lot of strenuous dives, but they wanted to get to this name so bad, but and they were willing to cut a corner to save some cash. And so when you dive deep, and especially more current, so I started doing deep dives in the 90s, and I feel like that was old school, but there was deep divers from the 50s. But deep air was a tool. And so when I say deep air, so you're breathing compressed air underwater deeper than most recreational limits. And so it's a tool, and you can leverage that tool however you need. It could be a cost factor. It could be logistics. It could be a whole bunch of other factors. I think the other thing is mixed gas, which they insert helium into the mix in a small degree, that they eventually increase the safety margin of everything. But there's a cost. In the 90s, it was super expensive. Some of the costs went down, or the availability of the gas became available, or just more mainstream, more well-known. Even dive shops and dive facilities started adding helium there. And so it became just this common occurrence over time. Today, I think it's super common. In fact, they moved the rebreathers so you could have computer-controlled regulation of what the mixtures are for the mixed gas, and it gets obviously more technical. But going back to the last dive and this father-son team, to have mixed gas, it was going to cost more. Mixed gas would have reduced the nitrogen level inside the compressed air. So when we breathe air, there's nitrogen and oxygen. It's not 100% oxygen. In fact, it's only 19 point something percent oxygen anyways. And so it depends on what reader you're given to, but still, like, most of it's composed of, it's about 79% of nitrogen, and then there's some other mixed gas, small percentage, 1 or 2% or something like that. So because of the amount of nitrogen, when you go underwater, that's where the bends comes in. There's nitrogen narcosis, which it's like drinking alcohol. And so there's all these things. So if you're a scuba diver, you've heard all this stuff, all of it's true. But you can build a tolerance for it, just like alcohol. And so they had a high tolerance for this stuff, so they thought they could manage it. But it would have been a lot safer if they had a helium and do decompression stops, and they didn't do it. So they went with air. Of course, problems occur. Murphy's Law. Problems occur. In fact, I think they even talked about they were inside of a chamber and a bookshelf had fallen on one of the kid or something. I don't remember all the details. It's a great book. I recommend it if you're interested in scuba and life stories. This is good book. Anyhow, because of all those issues, they ran out of air in some degree. I mean, they had air, but they couldn't do all the decompression stops. So they boarded the dive, aborted all those decompression stops. And these decompression stops allow the microbubbles that are in your bloodstream from breathing to equalize with the surrounding pressure. So as a whole nother topic, maybe we'll do that on another podcast. But and so they skipped all that, so they're bubbling. If you ever shook up a bottle of soda and you get all those bubbles and then you take the cap off, that's essentially what's going on here. And so they went into the chamber, and both of them end up not making it because they were trying to shortcut something to save a little bit of cash. And let's face it, everything's expensive, so we're always looking for ways to do it. I get it, right? And so I had an old friend of mine years ago. He was actually in the business. He moved over to a different segment of the business, so he doesn't do health insurance anymore, and we lost touch. But he always said if the cost of food went up by 300%, nobody would starve, and we would still have obesity problems and other ailments as an issue. And unfortunately, here as we record this in 2024, we're almost halfway there. But people will figure out a way to afford it. They'll figure out how to buy the food so they can survive, right? So, but with inflation, it's there, and of course, cost of goods, and we had COVID behind us and whatnot. But even gas prices went up over even the last 3 years. And you still see cars on the road. In fact, I feel like it's more. And you still have boaters out in the water burning gas out there and having a good time. They all adapt, right? And you're in business. There may be one day that all of a sudden you got a tax bill that doubled and you weren't even expecting it. How do you have to figure out a way to pay for it, right? At least for some people, it's going to go up. And I'm not talking about politics. I'm just saying that in business, all of a sudden things surprises and it happens. It could be a misstep. It could be a change in law, which occurred in the last 3 years. And so people are paying more in general. And so, but life keeps going on. You figure out a way to go through it. And from the world of Butch Zemar, I always call this forced affordability. I'm sure I got it from someplace, but I always say forced affordability. And so you put your big boy pants on, you kind of push through, and oddly enough, you usually come out on the other side and you did just fine. You have no idea how it even occurred because you did the math beforehand, and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to make it through, and you get to the other side, and actually nothing changed except for the big bill. But many times this happens, and most of the negativity about the whole experience was pre-thought by you and not really the reality, right? And so it wasn't a big deal when you get through the other side. I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me personally, professionally, and then dealing with some of it with my client base. So somehow you figure out a way to pay for it all. This is one of the reasons why financial advisors, and I'm not trying to give financial advice, but just to point out, they recommend just putting away something for retirement, just to get started. It could be when you're 18 years old, or it could be when you're 58 years old. Just pick something and start putting it away. $10 a month, 100, 1,000, whatever it might be, right? And so at first, it's kind of like this crunch time, and you're like, how am I going to survive, right? And so whatever number you come up with that is for your financial situation, somehow when you end up on the other side, somehow you still live the same lifestyle you have, and then you actually have retirement savings. It's kind of like just magic, right? Just magic appears, right? But what isn't magic is changing some of the costs of those forced affordability items to whatever preconceived knowledge you have that you feel like it should be. And maybe in some ways, when you start doing some homework, you could change vendors, supplies, find a new tax code, maybe shift some employees around. Like you could find some savings somewhere. That some of these consultants charge big money for them just to go up there and just clean things up a little bit that you maybe didn't see. It could be, again, changing processes, again, change suppliers. There's a whole bunch of stuff. You might be able to show it. And in some ways, you might get a breakthrough on it, right? You just pull the right lever and all of a sudden, bam, either revenue goes up or cost goes down or some combination of both. But the reality is that, the cost of bread and cost of milk, it is what it is, right? The employee costs, right? Salaries, payroll, benefits, whatever it might be, it is what it is, right? Like it's either you have it or you don't. And if you prefer to have it, the cost is there, right? Same thing with taxes, right? As much as, a lot of these entrepreneurs go out there and create $1 and the government's in there in their pocket and they produce nothing for you. And I being obviously vague on that because there's obviously support with taxes. I'm not buying a fighter jet or a aircraft carrier. And so there is some value there. I guess my roadways that I still pay for in Illinois on the tollway, but that's a different topic too. But I can't tell you how many times in my career as an advisor that someone pushes back and is looking for this magic wand on employee benefits or health insurance, depending on what their situation is, right? And so they're just pushing back. They want this magic wand. They just come up with this idea that health insurance shouldn't cost as much, and I'm going to find a solution with or without you, right? And they're so convinced this is going to occur. And I get it, right? I love the drive. I love the passion. I think more Americans need the drive, whether you're an employee, your owner, partner, board of directors, whatever. You need that passion to fix the whole system. I think it's going to come from you. It's not going to come from the federal government. It's not going to come from the state government. There's no, socialized medicine that's going to solve your problem. It's you. So put your big boy pants on and start getting the same passion. But I'm going to talk about some ways you could address that. And in some cases, they feel like they don't care. They're just going to get the end result that they're looking for. And whether it's with you or without you as an advisor, they're just going to figure it out. And if you're not willing to contribute to that, they're just going to do it. But eventually, some of these conversations, they start talking down to you as if they know more than you. It happens more often than I could even count. And, there was one story years ago. This is before the Affordable Care Act too. There was a board member at this company that said, I think we could save money on it. All of a sudden they had this passion. This is a project they're going to do. And they claim they found a solution for it, saved a bunch of money. But even during the exit of the original health plan offering, they became short and rude and very disrespectful, as if they were moving on to greener passages and they could care less about you. About 18 months later or so, a couple of the employees of the company, and this was a good-sized company, so it was only a couple of them, that made these major claims, right? And they finally exceeded limits in the internal limits of the policy. Eventually, the company was sued. I never heard the outcome of it, but any company in a position of just being sued for any reason, even if there's no fault, it's a bad situation to be in. And the bigger you are, the harder you fall. But if you fast forward to 2024 and it happened now, these employees would probably win under the federal law of Consolidated Appropriations Act, or the CAA. Johnson & Johnson's going through this now. I'm not saying they're going to lose. I have no idea. It's actually the whole industry is watching and seeing what the outcomes are. And so I think that's going to make or break a lot of things that are going to happen after the case, and they're the first one with the lawsuit. Maybe they're not the first one, but they're first or second. There's another one out there as well, and there's actually more since then. But there was another company, 15 employees, there's no benefits, health insurance just for the owner and the family, because they didn't really care about supplying. They didn't want to pay anything towards health insurance for their employees. But they didn't want to pay this higher cost. So the renewal came in. It didn't double or triple or anything crazy. It normal increase, and they wanted something else. They were just, that's it. You know what? I'm done. We're going to do something different. They literally just called this week as I record this. They just called this week, and they had shared with me that their move wasn't worth the cost savings. I didn't move them to that product. I advised against it. I told them that, we buy in health insurance for the big stuff. And when that big stuff actually occurs, you want coverage there. We're not buying it so you could save money on health insurance and pay a little copay at the doctor. No, that's actually not what health insurance is supposed to be designed for. We have other podcasts where we talk about, what is insurance pooling and what should be health insurance should be really paying for. Health insurance pays for way too much, and insurance companies love it because it gives them a reason to charge more. But this past client, it said that their out-of-pocket expenses on a claim far exceeded any of the premium savings that they were going to save. And so they were actually in a financial situation that actually may force them into bankruptcy. I don't know. I just know it's a huge dollar amount. I don't know if they could sustain it or negotiate and see what else comes, but it's an issue, right? These are definitely sad stories. But people need to become smart shoppers. Again, carry that passion. Let's bring it to the table. I love it, right? And so we need more of those, but we need to channel those passions to better outcomes. Because it could get in your own way. It's almost like the ego gets in the way and you go too far and you have more negative results than what it was worth. But not, part of the reason is because not all brokers are the same. There are some brokers out there for the almighty dollar, right? There's brokers out there that are retaining large employers onto a fully insured platform because they make more money, right? There are other cases, though. You have to do your due diligence. There's brokers that are leaving them on the fully insured because of other calculated risk factors that are already accounted for and reviewed every single year or multiple times a year with that employer to see when they can actually make the move. But so I'm not defaulting to if you're on a fully insured and you're a middle or large company that's bad news and your broker's terrible. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, again, you have to do due diligence. As long as you got plans, you're working the plans. If you're just kind of staying there and you're not really getting results, then that's an issue. But, the reality is most advisors have resources, really good resources, right? It would take you years to figure out who to connect with and what are the right ones. And that's what we come to play. And the problem is that employers haven't paid for us for years. I think on a larger perspective, definitely they did. There's a lot of retainers plus commissions, and it's moving downhill. So small employers that are listening to this, don't be surprised during your lifetime that you're probably going to have to pay a retainer for consulting. And then the commissions are really going to be for servicing of the plan, which does not have consulting. It's already occurring now, so don't be blindsided. And it's going to happen more and more. Brokers are losing money on cases. So a lot of times with smaller accounts, I'm not just trying to point the blame, but when smaller companies try to do planning and goals and targets for revenue, they never factor in the cost of health insurance. Bigger companies do. It's factored in. Maybe they have a hired CFO. Smaller companies just don't think about it. It's not factored in. There's no predictability. So even clients that complain about it currently, like their revenue's been flat for 5 years. Sure, I know it's tough. Entrepreneurship is tough. Generating new business because you lost business. You're always playing catch up. And so I'm not faulting anybody. I'm just saying that in a planning process that it's never factored in. Large companies do it, small companies don't. There could be a sign there for smaller businesses to do better. And in other cases with these small and mid-sized companies, they don't break down the process of the renewal so they could address each issue. What they try to do is actually eat the whole whale as a whole instead of one bite at a time. You can't eat a whole whale. You can only do a bite at a time. The reality is the renewal, they just kind of take it in one big bite, and you just can't do that. You can't chew it, you can't appetite it, you can't digest it, the whole 9 yards, right? Same thing with your medical renewal. There's so many there's so many pieces to a benefit plan that you have to do the homework and you have to pull each lever and you have to figure it out. So the passion and the glory that you bring to the table to saving money need to be in the small details of each of the plan designs. So whether it's the pharmacy benefit manager, the claim advocacy, it could be wellness, it could be outpatient services, inpatient services. There's so much that goes into it, and then how you fund it and how it's expensed, like a whole bunch of stuff. You have to pull those levers. But even more so, when you start pulling those levers and start getting more engaged in that capacity, you'll have more predictable outcomes. In fact, you could actually have a multi-year outlook, so you could actually predict over those period of time, and then you can actually put it into the budget of your entire company. You could predict those renewals before they occur, and you'll probably be fairly accurate. I wouldn't say to the T, but you might get lucky. But I'm just saying that you could have a little bit more expectations. Right now, there is an expectation right now for renewals. Like the last 10 years with the Affordable Care Act, outside of the first few years, it's actually been on average anywhere from 9 to 15%. But if you narrow that, most of them have been 9 to 12%. So you could actually predict that the year before, but most people just disregard it, right? You could plan to pad that with new revenue. Maybe you have to increase your margins, maybe increase the products the cost, whatever it might be, and obviously other costs are going up. And many companies across the country have to start increasing their fee, and a lot of them do. I always say that everybody else is increasing their fee but us, but other businesses need to start doing that as well, or figuring out a way to generate more revenue off of it. But the flip side, though, is if you plan all this, pull the right levers, plan the revenue stream that needs to take care of it, and if you're wrong, you just over budget, it just means that you have more cash. It's really not a bad thing, and you did the right thing.